Diencephalon is located in the center of the brain, so you can only see it in a sectioned brain. You cannot see it in a whole brain. There are 4 parts, both on the right and the left. The thalamus, the hypothalamus, the epithalamus, also known as the pineal gland, and the subthalamus. The subthalamus is sometimes called the subthalamic nucleus, and that's the same thing. Three of the 4 parts of the diencephalon are visible on this mid-sagittal section, which is a close-up view. The thalamus, the epithalamus, and the hypothalamus. The subthalamus is not visible on this slide. This is a lateral view showing the diencephalon close-up. This slide shows the thalamus from an anterior view on the left side of the screen and a posterior view on the right side of the screen. The thalamus has a long list of functions. One of them is that third-order somatosensory neurons from the ascending spinal cord tracts synapse in the thalamus. If you look at your sensory tracts, you'll see that there are 3 neurons in most of those tracts, and the third one goes from thalamus to somatosensory cortex. Upper motor neurons pass by the thalamus but do not synapse in it, and those form a structure called the internal capsule, and are the descending tracts that we learned about in the spinal cord. I want to make the point again that the upper motor neurons go near the thalamus, but they do not synapse in it. This slide shows all of the various nuclei of the thalamus. It kind of looks like a bee. You can organize the nuclei within the thalamus into groups, and the most important group for our class are the relay nuclei. These are nuclei where there are synapses that then send postsynaptic neurons all across the cerebral cortex. 2 important relay nuclei in the thalamus are the ventral posteromedial nucleus, VPM, and the ventral posterolateral nucleus, VPL. Each of these has somatosensation from the face or body that then projects to somatosensory cortex, to the sensory homunculus. In the thalamus, there is a general awareness of these sensations, but specific awareness does not occur until the action potentials get to somatosensory cortex. 2 other relay nuclei of the thalamus are the ventral anterior, or VA, and ventral lateral, or VL nuclei. The VA nucleus connects the basal ganglia to the motor cortex, and the ventral lateral nucleus connects the cerebellum to the motor cortex. The last 2 relay nuclei are the lateral geniculate and medial geniculate nuclei, LGN and MGN respectively. Both of these connect to the cerebral cortex. The lateral geniculate nucleus connects the optic tracts to the visual cortex, and the medial geniculate nucleus connects the vestibulocochlear nerves to the auditory cortex. So all of the relay nuclei that we've learned so far are taking some kind of sensation or motor function and projecting to a specific part of the cortex. You should be able to state which part of the cortex each of these relay nuclei sends action potentials to. The non-specific nuclei connect to all parts of the cortex and help to maintain consciousness. These have a lot of connections from that ascending reticular activating system we learned about, and a lesion to the non-specific nuclei will cause a coma. There are different names for different parts of the non-specific nuclei. Please don't worry about learning the specific names. As it says on the slide, the textbook has slightly different names for those, and there is not a general agreement. What you need to know is that in general, the non-specific nuclei are required for consciousness, and if they are damaged, a coma will result. The other thalamic nuclei are together grouped as association nuclei, and they seem to be involved in emotional responses, but we don't understand their functions very well. So you don't need to worry about learning these. This slide is just another view showing the nuclei of the thalamus. The hypothalamus is located inferior and anterior to the thalamus and consists of 4 small nuclei. The mammillary bodies are considered part of the hypothalamus, and we will see these when we go in the lab and look at brains. The hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland, which in turn controls the endocrine system. So this is the connection between the brain and the hormones in the body. The hypothalamus has many functions. The most important ones are listed here on this slide. It controls the entire endocrine system. It controls the autonomic nervous system. It regulates basic functions of the body like hunger, appetite, body weight, sleeping and waking, thirst and drinking, body temperature, sex drive, and reproductive behaviors. This slide is just a close-up view of the various nuclei within the hypothalamus. You don't need to worry about the names of any of these. The hypothalamus controls the endocrine system and releases hormones that stimulate the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, or hypophysis, is located immediately inferior to the hypothalamus in a little space within the skull. The anterior pituitary, which is known as the master gland, then releases hormones that stimulate all of the other endocrine glands of the body. So this slide shows the control of the endocrine system by the hypothalamus, the anterior pituitary, and then it shows all of the other hormones and endocrine glands that are found around the body. You don't need to worry about the specific hormones. I just want you to know this basic system where the hypothalamus controls the pituitary, which controls the endocrine glands. Neurons in the hypothalamus also act in the posterior lobe of the pituitary, and there are two major hormones that are released. Oxytocin, which causes contraction of the uterus during labor and childbirth, and contraction of the mammary ducts for letdown of milk, and also vasopressin, or antidiuretic hormone, which increases blood pressure. The autonomic nervous system controls the autonomic nervous system by way of the central autonomic fibers. These travel with the reticulospinal tract, and this connection allows the hypothalamus to connect to and direct the action of both sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. So the example that's given on this slide is that if your body temperature goes up, your hypothalamus will detect that. It will send action potentials through the central autonomic fibers that will activate the sympathetic nervous system to turn on your sweat glands, and then your body temperature decreases. This is a great example of a homeostatic negative feedback loop. The hypothalamus also controls body weight. It responds to hormones produced in your fat cells and in your digestive tract, and controls your hunger and appetite and a feeling of fullness. And this is mainly determined by genes that code for these various hormones, and that's really what determines body weight. The third part of the diencephalon is the epithalamus, also known as the pineal gland. This is a small structure that secretes the hormone melatonin and induces sleep. The last part of the diencephalon is the subthalamus, or subthalamic nucleus. This tiny structure is actually considered part of the basal ganglia circuit and is involved in control of movement. So we're going to learn about that later. So you don't need to worry about learning that right now.